Good morning, students. Today we are going to read the private expenditure versus public expenditure in the topic of allocation of the resources in the subject of economics O levels. So concentrate yourself here. We are going to start. The first thing that we are going to read in the lecture is the public expenditure. Public expenditure is the expenditure done by the public sector. It includes expenditures by the central government, local authorities or regional bodies, and state-owned enterprises. So the expenditures done by these bodies are called public expenditures. There are two broad categories of the public expenditure. The first category is the exhaustive spending. One is called exhaustive spending. This involves the public sector directly buying goods and services such as the buying medical equipment, paying the police and the building roads. So the spending which is done directly by the public bodies are called exhaustive spending. In this case, the public sector determines the use of the resources. The second category is non-exhaustive expenditure or transfer payments. So the other category is the transfer payments, transfers of the money to the people, for instance, pensioners and the unemployed, and to the firms in the form of the subsidies and the grants. So this type of the spending is called transfer spending or transfer payments, or non-exhaustive spendings or non-exhaustive expenditures. The next thing that we are going to read in the lecture is the use of the public expenditure. National and regional governments spend money on. So these are the things on which the government spending is done. Number one, public goods. Number two, merit goods. Number two, supporting vulnerable groups into the society, into the country. Next is helping private sector industries, for instance, on the research and development, or for increasing the status of the employees in some cases. Next is covering any losses incurred by the state-owned enterprises, and managing the economy, including promoting employment. So these are the areas on which the regional governments spend money on. So regional and the national governments spend money on. The next thing that we are going to read in the lecture is financing public expenditure. Public expenditures can be financed by taxation. So these are the sources of the money for the public sector's institutes. Number one is taxation. Number two, borrowing from the profits of the state-owned enterprises. And number three is the privatization. The amount of the tax a government can raise is influenced by. So this is very important question. This is very important short topic. The amount of the tax a government can raise is influenced by the income of the country. So if more the income of the country, the amount of the tax can be raised. The willingness of the citizens to pay taxes. So if people's attitude is positive towards paying taxes, so the amount of the tax, the rate of the tax can be increased. Next is the reaction of the firms and workers to tax changes. So if the tax is applied on the betterment of the country and the firms, and if the reaction of the firms and workers is positive, then the tax rate can be increased. And lastly, tax rate in other countries. So if there is a decreased tax rate in a particular country as compared to the rest of the world, so that particular country can increase the rate of the tax. In a democracy, people may not be prepared to vote for a political party which is planning to raise tax rates, because the people do not like to pay more. People always like the political party which actually relaxes them in terms of the taxes. A government may also be reluctant to raise taxes if it thinks that the workers will work for fewer hours or the emigrate in case of the increasing of the rate of the taxes, multinational companies will leave the country. It may be particularly worried about raising tax rates if other countries have lower rates. So these are the points due to which the government is reluctant to raise the tax rates. A flat tax is a tax which only with only one rate, which is often low. So throughout the economy, only one rate of the tax is applied. That kind of the tax is called flat tax. Estonia, for instance, does not even tax firms' profit if they are reinvested. So Estonia, the country, is actually encouraging the firms to reinvest in the economy. So in the long run, the country and the people will get prosper when the firms reinvest into the economy, and the country is giving them the incentive that that kind of the investment is tax free. Ability of a government to borrow will depend on its credit worthiness at home and abroad. If people, firms, foreign governments, and international organizations believe that they will be repaid and their payment will not be wasted, they will be willing to lend to the government. Amount borrowed by a government will be influenced by. So these are the factors which will influence the amount of the money to be borrowed. Number one, the state of the economy. If the state of the economy is very good, so more amount can be borrowed. Number two, level of the economic development. If there is good economic development in the country, so more can be borrowed. Acceptable rate of the interest. If acceptable rate of the interest is offered, then more can be borrowed, and if unacceptable rate or a bad rate is offered, less can be borrowed. The more the number of the state-owned enterprises in a country and higher the profit made by them, the more revenue a government may raise. So if the country's economy is going well and the public enterprises are making profit, so government will make revenue. If, however, state-owned enterprises make losses, they will drain the government's revenue and won't be able to act as a source of the revenue. Selling of state-owned assets, including state-owned enterprises, to the private sector can raise revenue in the short run. So in the short run, you will get money. But if the assets, however, were profitable, the sales may reduce government's revenue in the long term. Here is a question that will make your concepts more clear, how the questions come from this topic into the paper. A government borrows money to build new schools, hire more teachers, and buy educational equipment in order to raise the school living age. This action may, in the longer term, increase tax revenue, some of which can be used to repay the loan. The first question is, apart from the borrowing, identify one other way the government could have been influenced about its expenditure on the education. So apart from the borrowing, tax revenue can be used to spend on the education. The next question is, why may a government spend more on the education? So the answer is, it may want to spend money on the education, and it may be concerned that everyone should have access to this vital service. It may be worried that if left to the market forces, it will be under-consumed. Improved education may also help to raise labor productivity and increase productive capacity of the workers. So this is the reason the government are concerned to spend more on the education. The next question is, why may spending money on the education increase the tax revenue? So this is a question which apparently seems difficult to understand. So the question is, why may spending money on the education? But this is true in the long run. So spending money on the education increase the tax revenue. So look now, answer. Spending more on the education should, in the long run, raise productivity. This should increase the economic growth. If the country does not grow, income and expenditure will increase. So, sorry, if the country does grow, income and expenditure will increase, and hence the government will receive more direct and indirect tax revenue. So, this is in the long run done. The next topic that we are going to read in the lecture is the government influence on private sector expenditure. The government influences private sector expenditure in a number of the ways. These include taxing income and expenditure. So this is the one way government can influence the private sector expenditure. Number two is providing subsidies. So if government provides subsidies, definitely the private sector will spend more. And if more taxes are applied, so the cost of the production will be rise, so less will be produced, so the private sector will spend less because the cost of the production is now high. Next is giving grants. So giving grants will encourage the private sector to spend more. Influencing the level of the economic activity. So if economic activity is going good, so the private sector will spend more. The next thing that we are going to read in the lecture is the private sector investment, for instance, would be increased by number one, the introduction of the government investment grants. So if government is giving more grants, so private sector will spend more. Investment grants would encourage private sector firms to buy more capital goods. A cut in corporate tax. So if tax is cut, so the rate of the tax is reduced, so the private sector will be encouraged to spend more. A cut in the corporation tax will increase the willingness and ability of the firms to invest. Next is a cut in the rate of the interest. So if the interest rate is reduced, so the private sector will be encouraged to spend more because the cost of the production will be reduced. A lower interest rate would reduce the cost of borrowing to buy capital goods and would reduce the opportunity cost of using retained profit to buy the capital goods. The next thing that we are going to read in the lecture is the comparison of the expenditures by the public and the private sectors. There is some debates as to whether public or private sector expenditure leads to a more efficient allocation of the resources. Do households and firms make better decisions than the governments? In practice, there are advantages and disadvantages of both private and public sector expenditure. So both sectors are having plus and minus. So we have to compare actually. So here comes an example that will make your concepts more clear. A new airport, for instance, could be built by the private or the public sector. There may be a number of the advantages in it being built by a private sector firm. The profit incentive and the force of the competition may imply that it will build a high quality airport at low cost and in less time. So these are the benefits of constructing a new airport by the private sector. On the other hand, there are some disadvantages being done by the private sector. So there is a risk, however, that a private sector firm may be a monopoly and hence may not be forced to keep its costs down. So in case of the monopoly, there will be no fear for the firm to keep the costs down. Thus, it may charge a high price for building the airport. Also, a private sector firm will also take only private cost and benefits into account. They will not be concerned with the external cost. So this is another disadvantage of building a new airport by the private sector. On the other hand, using public expenditures to build public sector to build an airport may also have its own drawbacks. So here are the drawbacks of the airport being built by the public sector. So knowing that the state is paying a state-owned enterprise or private sector firm hired by the government may not keep its cost down. Next is a state-owned enterprise may lack the commercial expertise to complete the project on the other hand on the time. So this is another drawback if the airport is being built by the public sector. Next is there may also be delays in the decision making by the government to go ahead with the project because the red tape is the problem. So decision making is very slow in the public sector. So these are the disadvantages. of the airport being built by the public sector. On the other hand, there are some advantages of the work being done by the public sector. So look now, major benefit, it is likely to carry out a cost benefit analysis. So this is the biggest advantage when the work is done by the public sector. So this involves measuring all the private cost and the benefits involved. In the case of an airport, the private cost will involve the cost of the land. So this will be the cost which have to be bear by the public sector, the cost of the labor employed to build and run the airport, and the cost of the building material and the maintenance. So these are the private costs which will be bear by the public sector. The major private benefit is the revenue that will be earned. So this is the private benefit. Now we are going to check what will be the external cost and benefits of building the airport. The external cost may include operation of the airport, damage to the environment, noise due to risk of the accidents, and congestion near the airport. So these are the external costs. The external benefits may include employment in the area due to tourism and making it a more attractive as a site for the domestic firms and multinational companies. So these are the external costs and benefits, and here are the private costs and benefits. So we will compare now what are the total social cost and what are the total social benefits. If the total social cost exceeds the total social benefits, then this project will be discarded. And if the total social benefits exceeds the total social cost, then this project will be done. So this is actually the cost benefit analysis. When all the calculations have been made, the social cost and the benefits are compared. If social cost exceeds social benefits, the government will not proceed with the project. And if social benefits exceed social cost, it will go ahead. Cost benefit analysis, a method of assessing investment projects which takes into account social cost and benefits. Okay, here comes another question that will make your concepts even more clear. The private sector in China is responsible for growing amount of the output and employment. Some economists argue that private sector firms are more profitable and efficient than the state sector. And here is a question: how may the government benefit from private sector firms being more profitable? So here is the answer: government will benefit in terms of the high corporation tax, because if the private sector firm is earning money, they are making huge profits. So definitely in terms of the corporation tax, government will get more. There will also be a probable reduction in the amount of the unemployment. So this is another advantage of private sector firms being progressing, because they will employ more people. This is because profitable firms are likely to expand and take on more workers. Here is another question: why may private sector firms be more efficient than state-owned enterprises? So here comes the answer: private sector firms may be more efficient than state-owned enterprises, as the market provides both a carrot and a stick for them to produce at a low cost and to make the products desired by the consumers in the right quantity. If firms are efficient, they are rewarded with high profits, and if they are not, they are punished by going bankrupt. So this is the reason private sector firms are more efficient. Here comes another question: the production of which type of the goods given below has to be financed by the government? So the answer is D, government financed for the public goods. Private sector firms do not have the financial incentive to produce public goods, as they cannot stop non-payers from consuming the product. This means that either state-owned enterprises have to produce them, or the government has to provide the incentive for the private sector firms to make them by paying them. So this is the reason the private sector firms are not willing to produce the public goods. Either way, the government finances their production. Here comes another question. Which of the following is an example of the transfer payments? So transfer payments are actually non-exhaustive expenditures which are actually not spending directly. So the answer is government expenditure on students' grants. So because they are not actually giving benefit directly to the government, but in the long run, this will be the benefit for the government. So look now, a transfer payment is a payment to someone not in return for providing a good or service. In the case of the government transfer payments, the government does not decide the use of the resources. This is done by the recipients. In the case of A, C, and D, the government decide the allocation of the resources. Okay, here is another question. How may an increase in the government expenditure on the education of the poor benefit the rich? So look now, this is again a very a nice statement which is actually ununderstandable for the common people. So increasing government expenditure on the education of the poor benefit the rich. But the answer is C. In the longer term, the productivity of the workers may rise, and if hence the productive capacity of the economy might increase, so definitely the rich will benefit from it. So look now, all the members of the country can benefit from the education of the poor, since they should become more productive workers and hence would help in increasing the output of the country. So if the country's economy will go well, so everyone, particularly the rich, which are actually owning the major industry of the country, will benefit from it. Here comes another question. Which of the following is a possible aim of the public sector expenditure but not that of the private sector? So B is the answer, to ensure full employment of the resources. So this is the possible aim of the public sector. So look now, the government may be seeking to achieve full employment. When households and firms spend their money, they are not taking into account the effect it will have on the employment. And finally, we are having a exam tip. Be careful with the word public. Sometimes it refers to the government as in public expenditure and public sector. It can, however, also refer to the people as a whole, as in the general public, or open to all people, as in a public limited company. So be very careful when there comes the word public. So I hope so, students, this will be much more easier and interesting lecture for you to understand now. So read this lecture again, understand it, learn it, and make your notes. Thank you so much.